Hello, my name is Ullrich Bethe. I am a physician at the Institute of Translational Research at University of Cologne, and the topic of my talk today will be adaptive platform trials. So this talk intends to give you a first idea of what an adaptive platform trial, APT, is all about. I'll acquaint you with some basic methodological terms and concepts, and there'll also be examples of what an APT can look like. Just as a quick recap, these are the phases of clinical development. There is phase one, so a phase one clinical trial, first in human. There is the phase two clinical trial for hypothesis generating. Then there's phase three, also known as a confirmatory trial. And then there are phase four trials that are conducted post or following the marketing approval. For the purpose of this talk today, we'll focus on phase two and phase three. How can we best ensure that preclinical findings are best translated to the clinic in a very systematic manner? We need to select the most appropriate methodology for a phase two or phase three trial. Of course, this is following phase one, the first in human. There are several options. Amongst those are the traditional, in quotation marks, randomized controlled clinical trial, and the rather recent or new methodology of an adaptive platform trial, APT, which is basically a more advanced version of a randomized controlled trial. So in a randomized clinical trial, RCT, which I'll dub traditional, there is randomization. So it's either A versus B, some new intervention versus standard of care. There can also be multiple arms, not just A and B, but A, B, C, or D. This kind of trial is intervention focused. There is a fixed, so that means a set target sample size, so the number of enrollees. There is a defined start and end. And most importantly, the intervention does not change during the conduct of the trial. This is basically unchanged, still the gold standard to conduct a clinical trial, a randomized clinical trial. But there's a major drawback, and this being that for any new question you want to investigate, you have to set up a whole new randomized clinical trial. You have to set up all this from scratch. So before we move on to what's an adaptive platform trial, let's have a look at what defines a mere platform trial. So a platform trial is a more advanced type of randomized clinical trial. I mentioned that before. It is a multi-armed clinical trial that allows trial arms to be added or to be dropped during the course of the trial. It is disease-focused, not intervention-focused, and it can run perpetually, so forever on, using the same infrastructure, so the same platform. So you don't have to set up a whole new trial for a new question on the same disease or syndrome you want to investigate. And this, of course, can accelerate the speed and improve the efficiency of generating knowledge. And also, if a platform trial like that moves on forever, there is a continuous flow of evidence emanating from this trial. So this is a pretty nice visualization of what a platform trial looks like. So you have here the ability to drop arms early and the flexibility to add new arms. You have standard of care intervention 1 and 2. You have an interim analysis, another interim analysis. Here you added one arm, a new arm introduced. Here the second interim analysis, you drop an arm, and you can again introduce a new arm. So that's very nicely explained and visualized, excuse me, by Park and colleagues. So now what makes a platform trial an adaptive platform trial? So there is a received definition of what any adaptive trial design is about. So basically, that's a trial design, and here I'm quoting from the reference. It's a clinical trial design that offers pre-planned opportunities to use accumulating trial data to modify aspects of an ongoing trial while preserving the validity and integrity of the trial. So a platform trial that allows for dropping and adding trial arms qualifies as adaptive. It thus meets the minimum definition of an adaptive platform trial, APT. So adding or dropping arms of an APT of an adaptive platform trial is not the only adaptive features. So more options are as follows. So a particular intervention may become the new control as a result of interim analysis. There's the possibility of enriching the study population. So you can focus on or select subgroups that have a particular benefit from a given intervention at interim analysis. And there is response-adapted randomization, which is about modifying the allocation ratio based on accumulating trial data. So applying response adapted randomization, you can assign more participants to an intervention that has shown a better outcome in interim analysis. Then there's sample size reassessment. So you may not only change the allocation ratio, but interim analysis and the findings, the pre-specified findings, may allow you to reduce the sample size overall or increase it depending on the results of the interim analysis. Another adaptive feature is the switch to a surrogate endpoint. It's an endpoint that is more easily or faster attainable than the initial one. And there are even more features, adaptive features of an APT. So there's the possibility of including the one and same participant into different domains in parallel. You may want to have a look at the example of REMAP-CAP, which is a prime example of a COVID-19 treatment trial as an adaptive platform trial. And then the choice of control data, you may use all control data as control, as opposed to concurrent only control data, or you may also apply dynamic borrowing. So it's a mix of concurrent, non-concurrent control data. Clinical trial simulation plays a major role in advanced APT adaptations. So this is to be applied not only at the design stage and planning stage, but also during trial conduct. So it's a prerequisite for any advanced APT adaptations. So I'll just repeat it here. You simulate upfront and on an ongoing basis the potential effects of different adaptive features. Simulation can be incorporated into so you can incorporate into a fully fledged disease model any kind of artificial intelligence. You may incorporate data sources other than the accumulating trial data. For example, data, real world data. You may want to funnel that into your disease model that runs in the background of your ongoing trial. And not to be forgotten, there is a choice to be made whether you want to primarily use a Bayesian statistical approach or the statistical framework of your APT, as opposed to a frequentist approach. A Bayesian stats approach is particularly compatible for for modeling. However, there are some caveats because, at least in Europe, regulatory authorities, so EMA, basically do not favor this kind of Bayesian approach. So a standard frequentist approach is what EMA prefers, and this approach can also be chosen for an APT. So it's kind of, pretty much pretty obvious that the design of an adaptive platform trial is pretty complex. So this needs quite a bit of planning and preparation upfront. You have to liaise with all stakeholders upfront to get their input on the different implications of the APT. You have to agree with stakeholders on the choice of adaptive features, and your trial governance, who takes which decision at interim analysis, always based on results, of course. All the trial governance, its complexity depends on the complexity of the adaptation rules. However, even with a complex design, it is possible to keep execution of the trial, so the trial conduct at a trial site, fairly easy, and that should always guide you to find the to find a good match between trial complexity and user friendliness at the trial site, basically for investigators. So where does the concept of APT come from? It all started out in oncology. It is now mostly being used in infectious disease, mainly in treatment trials, and it can be used when multiple comparisons are desirable, but cannot be done sequentially. So that's what the REMAP-CAP trial I briefly mentioned before is about. So REMAP-CAP is an adaptive platform trial on treating COVID-19. And this is just one part of the consort diagram of REMAP-CAP, with the outcomes for the time period between March 17, 2020 and June 22, 2021. So not very long a time period. And here you can see that more than 4,800 enrollees, so patients or subjects got randomized to different domains. There was the immune modulation domain, the immunoglobulin domain, the antiplatelet domain, the anticoagulation domain, the antiviral domain, and the corticosteroid domain. So it was possible for a participant, for example, to be randomized to corticosteroids and also to administration of immunoglobulins. And this could then be assessed, investigated in parallel in the same participants. So instead of setting up a randomized clinical trial for each domain and just have a look at this here. There were 985 participants who got randomized. Only two remains not yet reported here, as this was just the results until June 2021. So instead of setting up 6 or more trials, all these questions were addressed in one single trial. Now, you may ask, oh, this sounds kind of complex. Is it really something for me, for my disease area of interest or of expertise? Should I embark on designing a clinical trial as an adaptive platform trial? I'll provide you with some examples on exploring how adaptive platform trial methodology can be applied. As I pointed out before, adaptive platform trials have been mainly conducted in treatment trials and not in prevention, and specifically so hardly at all in vaccine research, so on vaccine trials. And this is why the Institute of Translational Research here at the University of Cologne organized a workshop on exploring how APT methodology may well be applied in vaccine trials. Our workshop on APT and vaccine trials was attended by almost 60 people, vaccine trialists, virologists, vaccine immunologists, representatives of regulatory authorities, of ethics committees, members of national immunization technical advisory groups, and so on. And all this was funneled into this paper here, Innovative Approaches. So basically, adaptive platform trial methodology for vaccine trials as a key component of pandemic preparedness. And here you are some findings from this workshop. It sounds pretty basic, but it's not. It's not that easy to reach conclusions on what I present here. So that's why we needed a workshop. And so how to structure the approach? It was consensus that one should depart from a syndrome, and then zoom in on a given pathogen, and then investigate different populations. And these are options for protocol components. There should be a core protocol with a stats appendix and with a laboratory appendix. And then for the sub-studies of interest, there should be sub-protocols also as appendices to the core protocol. So subprotocol A, subprotocol B. So this may be a given pathogen in a specific population. And then there may be another subprotocol for disease X for a pathogen not yet known. So basically a template subprotocol focusing, for example, on an acute respiratory syndrome. And for in the context of vaccines, we talk about pandemic preparedness, and these subprotocols could be ever running in between pandemics, and this disease X protocol could then be activated for a pandemic emergency, could be activated without having to set up a whole new trial because the trial is already up and running. And this is just a theoretical exemplary setup of a vaccine APT that focuses on an acute respiratory syndrome in adults. So we have a defined larger population there of adults, so not kids, not infants, not pregnant women, not lactating women. And then here one focuses on different pathogens, and then it's the subpopulations. And yeah, and in a different representation, this could look like this. You have adults. You want to then investigate a subprotocol disease X in case of a pandemic emergency, and then you have population 1, population 5 that you define, and you can investigate different interventions with interim analyses at different time points. And this is another result coming from our workshop on our APD methodology in vaccines. So this is how an APT domain on seasonal influenza could look like. So at the very left, you have the different adult groups. So it's basically all comers, only differentiated by their age. So this is not about pregnant women. It is not about anyone below the age of 18. And the basic questions here are different ones as per age bracket. So yeah, and that's here the top line here in orange, here in yellow, and here in green. And I'll just let you have a look at it for a while. So now this slide is a visualization of the within trial learning in an APT, specifically so in a vaccine APT. So here, down here, you feed new arms, new domains into this model, and what comes out eventually are is evidence on new interventions, which may then lead to a policy or label change. And you have interim analyses during trial conduct that lead to updates of the trial design or updates of the underlying statistics. This is an iterative process. Here, where you see here at the red stage here, the decision is taken whether an intervention stays in the system or goes out, whether it's simply getting dropped or there's enough evidence to to publish the results. And there are trial participants fed into the model. So basically they're recruited. There's a site network of trial sites and a volunteer registry of individuals who want to participate in vaccine trials. There's certification. There's continuous, ever reiterated recertification, adaptive enrichment, and these enrollees get randomized and enrolled on the trial. And the whole process goes on and goes on, defined in the trial protocol. And at the stage here where it says update trial design, unblinded information is communicated to an independent data monitoring committee. So this has to be independent. So these members of this independent data monitoring committee, they must not be involved directly with the trial conduct. But based on the information they have from unblind data, they can make a recommendation towards the scientific steering committee of the trial. and then this is fed into the system. So a quite different example of how APT methodology can be applied is the CAN10 trial, the CAN10 project that investigates shortening of the duration of treatment for candidemia. CAN10 will be conducted within the NUM network, NUM being the network of German university hospitals. CAN10 investigates the shortening of treatment for candidemia in patients who are not immunocompromised. And it's a platform approach with a fairly simple adaptive feature. So there's an initial comparison between 14 days versus 10 days of continued antifungal treatment, counting the days after the initial clearance of candidemia. And if at interim analysis, the 10 days arm is shown to be superior, then a 7 days arm of treatment will be triggered automatically. So this trial addresses a clinical question of quite some high relevance. And yeah, outcomes of this trial will certainly be practice changing. And this trial is embedded in a pre-existing APT infrastructure, and that infrastructure is called NAPCON-TIP. It's basically the APT infrastructure of NUM, the Netzwerk Universitätsmedizin, or the network of German university hospitals. This CAN10 trial has a quite straightforward approach. So the main inclusion criterion is candidemia, plus the criterion of enrollees being adults. The main exclusion criteria being an uncontrolled focus on infection and neutropenia, so no neutropenic enrollees. The primary endpoint being reoccurrence of candidemia. Select other endpoints are health economics and patient-reported outcome measures, and the stats assumptions are also pretty much standards, with a 10% non-inferiority margin for experimental arms compared to standard, 90% of powered with a two-sided significance level at 5%, and the resulting target sample size is 300 subjects, with an interim analysis halfway through enrollment. Now, is there a place for any adaptive platform trial in clinical research on aging, us being here in the context of CECAD? So if you consider APT methodology for any of your projects, just start by defining your population or populations, the interventions, and the readouts of that clinical research. So basically the endpoints, outcome measures, those are the starting points. And then you will see, hey, is this maybe an option, APT? So exploring populations is more or less self-explanatory. Interventions may be a domain drugs, the domain diets, a domain of physical exercise, different forms of physical exercise versus non-domain vaccines, or any domain X, not yet known. And you should consider the time frame for your readouts. Those may be short-term, within a time period of weeks to months. There may be midterm endpoints at 1 year, long-term, multiple years, or simply survival or not. As I said at the beginning of my talk, this is simply, some slides to give you a first idea, let you have a first glimpse at what an adaptive platform trial is about. Nevertheless, take-home messages from this talk should be as follows. APT is a methodology of choice for a kind of defossilization of the traditional randomized clinical trial that has been around for quite some time. It is also a paradigm shift towards a continuously learning health system. So an APT being a platform that generates evidence perpetually, continuously, that also takes into account, that incorporates data sources from outside the trial. There's indeed a trade-off, the trade-off being that accelerated knowledge generation comes with quite a bit of more of design complexity. And if we are talking about pandemic preparedness settings, there should always be a built-in ability to pivot to emergency mode. That's the disease X subprotocol I refer to for any pathogen not yet known. And at our workshop in Cologne, one attendee, actually a representative of a regulatory authority, he put it rather nicely when he said, and this is a verbatim quote, he said, "The future is not about whether or not to use APT methodology. The future is only about to what degree APT methodology will be implemented in state-of-the-art trials." I think that's a pretty solid statement. And with this solid statement, I would like to conclude my talk. On the next slide, on this slide, there is some recommended reading or core reading if you want to acquaint yourself with this kind of trial methodology. So thank you for joining today. And as always, for any comment, requests, questions, whatever, please do not hesitate to contact us at academy@ucgn.de. Thank you and bye-bye.